Hey everyone, welcome back to Just the Watch. My name's Dave, and today I want to start with a question. Would you be willing to pay $450 for a watch that has a Miyota 821A movement inside of it? So Miyota 821A is a very basic entry-level movement. I rarely see it on watches north of $300, so to find it in a watch at $450 is a little bit hard to swallow. Now, if your answer is absolutely not, hard no, this might not be the watch for you. But if your answer is, well, how good is the rest of the watch? It depends. Then this might be something you're interested in. Today we're going to take a look at a watch from Laco Watches. This is from their entry-level navy line. And yeah, it's a watch that every time I look at it, I'm both blown away at the quality and the design, and slightly annoyed at the compromises that they made to make it an affordable, to bring it down to the affordable price range. Yet despite all that, it's kind of become one of, if not my favorite watches in my collection. Let's go ahead and take a look and see what you guys think. Okay, so Laco is a really interesting brand. They have a ton of heritage. The Laco name goes all the way back to the 1930s, where they were manufacturing watches for the German military, and they pioneered the Type B Flieger, which is one of the most influential watch designs in history. And yeah, so they have a lot of heritage going for them. They're offering watches that are still made in Germany today. They manufacture, primarily pilots' watches. Flieger watches are their biggest product, I think. But they also offer Navy watches, maritime watches. They said, Laco also created watches for the German Navy as well. And that's the line that we're going to be looking at today. Now, Laco, what they have is they have kind of usually two tiers of watches that they offer. They have, their full priced offerings that are usually around $1,000 or a little more than $1,000, and those are kind of no compromise watches. Then they also offer watches that are usually less than half that, in the kind of $300 to $500 range. And these watches, they share some of the characteristics of their more expensive ones, but they cut a lot of corners to try and bring it down from that $1,000 price down into this, $300, $350, $450 price range. And so that's the watch that we're going to be looking at today. Is from that affordable line. And yeah, we'll talk about the compromises that they made to get it down there and let you evaluate whether you think it's worth it or not, because $450 is, sort of on the upper end of affordable, I think. But there's a lot of benefits and a lot of positives coming out of it too. So it's a really interesting, I think, kind of combination of high-end production values and some lower end, it's particularly the movement being a lower end movement, and some other corners that they've cut. Let's go ahead and take a look at the watch. So the particular Laco Navy watch that we're looking at today is the Casablanca, which is again one of Laco's sort of budget friendly offerings. They offer this basically the exact same watch also under the Valencia name. So the Casablanca has the black PVD case, whereas the Valencia will have a silver case. You can also get it in a variety of sizes. We have the 42 millimeter version here today, but you can also get it in 39, and the black version, there's actually a 36 millimeter version called the Monaco, which is, again, they're all basically the exact same watch other than the case finishing and sizes. So a lot of choices there. It's nice that they offered you that. Okay, so dimensions and specifications on this version. So again, this one is the 42 millimeter diameter. You're getting 20 millimeters on the lug openings. So for straps, you're looking at 20 millimeter straps. Lug to lug is about 50 millimeters, and then it's about 12 millimeters high. All of the watches in this series feature a really amazing fully lumed dial, which is one of the, I think, best features of the watch and probably one of the biggest selling points of the watch. So it's really cool to see that, and we'll definitely get some lume shots of that as we go. You're also getting a sapphire crystal, 50 millimeters of water resistance, and inside you're getting a Miyota 821A movement, which is a very basic kind of entry-level movement. And it's particularly in thinking about that movement that you start to realize some of the compromises that they made on this watch. The movement obviously being the biggest one. So let's go ahead and start by talking about those. What did they do to take their kind of normal quality standard and bring it down into a lower price range? What compromises did they have to make to do that? Again, the first one is that movement. So inside, you're getting this really basic Miyota movement, which has that classic high spinning Miyota rotor inside of it. The movement has hand winding, but no hacking. So if you pull the crown out, the second hand does not stop. And because of the rotor, you can definitely hear it and feel it on the wrist. So there's kind of always that constant reminder of the movement that's inside. It is, however, a decently accurate kind of entry-level workhorse movement. Probably not going to need to worry about a lot of servicing or that or having any problems with it. It should run pretty well. But it is definitely a compromise. It's the kind of thing that you definitely notice it on the wrist, and particularly with that rotor noise and movement, it's sort of always this constant reminder that even though the watch you have is a very nice watch, and you would have had to spend a pretty good chunk of change for it, you would normally expect to have a higher end movement in a watch around $450 than a Miyota 821A. So that's a little bit of a bummer. Another area where I think they kind of cut a little bit of cost on is the integration of the date into the design of the watch. I feel like the design and the overall dial works a lot better without a date. In this case, it's kind of just has a little cutout there and the date is there. And I prefer to have a date on a watch. I think still I would prefer to have it like this than to not have a date at all, but this is one of those cases where I'm almost reconsidering it just because it's kind of distracting there. Again, it's just, the hole is just cut out of the dial and there's a date there. I would have preferred if they could have put maybe a border around it or some beveling or something to sort of integrate it into the design of the dial a little bit better. But I think part of that is also in relation to the movement. I think they've sort of decided that they're going to go with this less expensive movement in their basic line of watches, and when you're locked into that movement, you're also locked into kind of the position of the date on the dial. But it is a little bit distracting. I often look at the date and I feel like it's just not that well integrated into the design of the watch. And those are the biggest complaints I have, the biggest compromises. There are some other ones. The strap is okay. It's not the best strap that I've had. Again, I think for the price range for a $450 watch, I would have expected something a little bit nicer. I think I've had some cheaper watches that have better straps than this. It's a genuine leather strap. They claim it's a calf leather strap. It feels very soft and supple, but it is also fairly thin. And yeah, it doesn't feel like it's necessarily going to last a particularly long time. And just overall, the look of it is very kind of simple and yeah. And maybe I was expecting something a little bit more at the price range. Another interesting thing is the buckle. So it's a bead blasted silver buckle. It hasn't been PVD coated black, which usually I think if you got a black case, they give you a matching black buckle. That most manufacturers would try to do that. I'm not sure if this was a design choice or a cost cutting measure. It doesn't look bad. I kind of don't really mind it, but again, it's the kind of thing that you would expect that the buckle and the case match, and in this case they don't. And the last compromise I think they made, and this one is for me the least important one, and that's that they've taken the case and the crown and they use it across kind of a lot of their basic level watches, including their Fliegers. So if you buy one of their entry-level Flieger watches, it's basically this exact same watch with a different dial and handset. It's going to have the same case, the same crown, the same movement, a different strap as well, but they'll put in a Flieger dial and a Flieger handset and kind of call it a Flieger. And I don't really have a problem with that. I think the case and the crown, they're very nice case and crown. So I don't really fault them too much for that, but it is definitely a cost-saving measure. And it might be kind of awkward if you were started getting into collecting these watches, and you bought the Navy watch and then you go out and buy a Flieger and it's the exact same watch with a different dial on it. That might be a little bit weird. you might be hoping to have something a little bit more to differentiate it. But if you're only buying one of it, I think this is a great case. I think it's very well finished, very simple in its design, but very clean, very comfortable. Yeah, good overall. And then the crown I really like. I love the crown on this. It's one of the coolest crowns that I've seen. Just a really great shape to it and a lot of details on it. It looks great, feels great, really easy to use, really easy to grab and grip. Good size. So I love the crown that they did on this. And again, it's not a fault of it. It's just interesting that they have managed to save some money by using the same case across a fairly wide range of different watches. And so if those are the compromises, what are the benefits you get? What does Laco bring to the table? What are they offering you at a price in this price range? I think they're giving you quite a lot, actually. I think for me, one of my favorite features of the watch is my favorite part of the design is the handset that they used. It's a really elegant, really beautiful handset. You have these syringe hands for the minute and hour that are just really well done. The manufacturing is perfect on them. They're just cut out really sharply and cleanly. They have a really appealing shape to them, and yeah, just really elegant looking. The second hand also is really amazing. I think it's just this incredibly long, thin, needle-like second hand that looks like it's scraping the edge of the case with a really beautiful sort of leaf counterbalance on it. So the hands in particular, I think, are really stunning on this watch. They're a sort of a matte black painted. If you get a really close look, you can kind of see a little bit of almost a texture on them as well. And that black painting gives it a really impressive contrast to the cream dial, so it's really easy to read. And normally I prefer to have watches that have silver cases. I don't like the black cases typically. But I think the black hands and the black case and that white cream dial and then the black strap, it's just a really sharp look. I really love the way that it all comes together, and I think it looks better in this case than the Valencia. Even though originally I was leaning more towards the Valencia, I really like the black and cream look of this watch. I think it's just a really sharp look to it. The dial is also really well done. You'll see the lume here in a second. It's really bright lume, but because it's a fully lume dial, you kind of get a cream color look to it in daylight. And then what they've done is they've just done a simple printed dial, but the printing is very sharp, very well done, very tasteful. You get a nice kind of font that's very appropriate, I think, to the period in history that they're looking back to, and then that railroad chapter ring going around the outside, the second minute track. Again, just also really adds to the aesthetic. Just really beautifully done. It really gives you kind of that vintage feel to it. But it just makes, I think, just a really great daily watch. It's got a little bit of elegance to it, a little bit of sportiness to it. Yeah, it just goes really good with, I think, a lot of different outfits and things that you'll wear. And it's unique. It's not the kind of thing. This is what you would call a deck watch, which you don't see very many of these. You see more pilots' watches, you see field watches, and those all have their own design themes and elements. This is definitely coming from a different heritage and a different history, and it really shows in the design of the dial and the handset. And yeah, so I really appreciate that. It's kind of a really fun watch to wear. All right, let's go ahead and take a look at the lume. And the lume is, yeah, it's amazing. That's definitely one area where they did not skimp on. It's probably the most impressive lume that I've seen, and in large part just because it's a fully lume dial. There's probably, maybe some of my dive watches might have brighter lume pips on it, but because this entire dial is lumed and it's lumed very brightly, it's just incredibly easy to read in the dark. And using the black handset and the black printing makes it just contrast so well in the dark as well as in the daytime. So you're getting really great legibility in day or night because of that contrast. That contrast works perfectly in either situation. Because the dial is fully lumed, you almost have fun playing with it. I mean, like I'll get my black light out and you can almost paint the dial with it. It's really fun to play around. It's kind of cool because when you shine the black light on it to charge it, since the whole dial is lumed, the minute and hour hands will actually block some of the light. And so as the time passes, you'll see this shadow on your on your dial from when you shine the light on, the minute hand was covering up, or even sometimes the second hand will show up these little shadows. And I'll just sit there in the dark and be playing with it sometimes. And it's really cool how bright this lume is and how much of it is there, how much is on there. I basically have no problem using it throughout the night. It's almost like having Timex Indiglow, but like always on. Obviously, when you first charge it, it's going to be a lot brighter than later on in the night. But even later on in the night, it's still really easy to read, and I think easier to read than even most of my dive watches that I have. So if you like lume, that would be another big selling point for you. Overall, the fit and finish of the watch is really good. It feels really good on the wrist, and yeah, I enjoy wearing it. It's fairly comfortable. And just an overall, I think, really good quality build and design. I don't know if that's because of the German manufacturing, but I do feel like looking at this watch and feeling this watch, like Laco does do a good job on the quality, and that they really put a lot into that aspect of the watch. And so yeah, so I think I think having that made in Germany mark on there does give you a little bit of peace of mind, maybe. Finally, maybe the kind of X factor in all this is the heritage, and I think a lot of people, heritage is something that they either love or have no interest in at all. But I think that is definitely part of the value of this watch. Laco is a name that goes back into history, and Laco historically made some really significant contributions to the world of horology. They have a really rich military history. And even though the name has changed hands a number of times throughout its history, I think that heritage is still there. And it's just an interesting brand. It's the kind of brand that not as many people are familiar with. And yeah, so I really enjoy that. It does add something to this watch. Having that Laco name on there and knowing a little bit about the history does make me like the watch more. Whether it should or shouldn't, whether or not I should be attracted to something like that, I don't know, but it definitely does add something to the watch. I think that's something to consider too. If you enjoy that kind of heritage, if that's something that you're interested in, that is an added value to the watch. Yeah, and I think that kind of sums up most of what I think about this watch. So what do I think of the Laco Navy Casablanca? Well, like I said in the intro, it's become one of my favorite watches despite the corners that have been cut, and despite the fact that it does slightly annoy me every time I look at it and I am reminded of those cut corners. I think really what you're getting with this watch is if they had put in a higher end movement, maybe upgraded to like a Swiss Solita SW200, fixed that little date complication and made it a little bit more integrated into the dial, upgraded the strap a little bit. I would love to see it on like a sailcloth strap. That's kind of what I'm hoping to get eventually. I think that would look really cool and kind of match into the Navy heritage of the watch. If they did that, I think this would easily be a watch in the $600 to $700 price range. But that's not what they're going for. They're already offering watches that have a lot of these features in the $1,000 price range that seem to be pretty good watches in that price range. They're looking to offer something much more affordable, get it down under $500. And in order to do that, yeah, you've got to make some compromises, and they chose some interesting compromises. So I'll leave it to you guys what you think. If you're willing to pay, what I think is probably a fair price for what they are offering. Let me know what you guys think. Is this worth it? Worth the $450 asking price to you? Would you stay away? Do you have any experience with Laco watches? What would you like to see out of this one? Drop me a comment down below. Let me know. I always love hearing from you guys. And until next time, I'll see you later. And thanks for watching.